Smoak.
All right, we've played the Dave Aranda comments about Jacob Zeno. Grayson Grundhoefer's been all over this. He joins us normally Fridays, but today he's with us with the news of Jacob Zeno entering the transfer portal. Grayson, there's reasons. There's a lot of reasons. Sometimes we don't know all the reasons, but it's pretty obvious that Gary Bohannon is entrenched as a starter at Baylor. Shapen has taken over in the number 2. And then you have this young phenom in Kyron Jones there and whatever else they get. With maybe it's going to be Pyron again. Who knows? But did you have a chance to kind of get a feel for the reason other than the obvious of where the depth chart is?
Yeah, and honestly, I would also say don't forget C.J. Rogers either.
Yeah,
I know he's a walk-on,
his
but
father's
he's a guy who...
His dad's going to text me right now. He loves the show, and he's a very much a sleeping giant underneath that depth chart. You're exactly right, yeah.
No doubt, and he might be a reason why Baylor might actually be okay with not taking a quarterback in the 2022 class, and he would kind of be the de facto. But as far as the depth chart goes, I think this was a situation where, the first few games we saw, Jacob Zeno came in first to back up Gary Bohannon. But I think things shifted after that Kansas game, and I think Shapen kind of left his mark as far as the guy who could potentially be the number 2 going forward. And I think that was a big part of this reasoning for Jacob Zeno to go ahead and leave. But I also think, there's a lot of factors that go into this. And now that we're in the world of the transfer portal, I think it becomes a really positive decision for Jacob Zeno to go ahead and enter when he did, which is obviously today. The reason I say that is because it gives him the opportunity to take his time with his recruitment, get to know coaches, get to know programs, and also honestly watch programs during the season and kind of see, where might be a good landing spot, which coaches may decide to leave, just tons of factors. But this is going to be a really important decision for him. Obviously, he still has 3 years left. So any program is getting a fairly experienced young quarterback who still has a lot of time to learn and grow and develop. And I think that's going to be intriguing to programs. But yeah, I think it really comes down to the fact that he wasn't going to have a meaningful role on this current Baylor team, and the fact that he's got to start thinking about his future, because as a guy who's been in the program for 3 years, has had 3 different offensive coordinators, he really needs to go ahead and make sure that this decision is the perfect one. And, honestly, I think people are all talking about the drawbacks, what if injuries happen and things like that. But, Baylor has a very healthy quarterback room. And I honestly think this might, in the long run, be okay for this current Baylor team, just because, you don't have people still making arguments that, throw in Jacob or throw in Shapen or whatever. Gary doesn't have to worry about that at all. And I just think it's a little bit healthier, and it gives Blake Shapen all the second team reps, which I think is going to be very important for his development going forward as well.
Are any of these schools that recruited him before potential, once he picked Baylor over, are they potential for Jacob Zeno?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and kind of look to make sure on all the offers that he had. He had quite a few. I mean, he was a 4-star quarterback and an Elite 11 guy. But what I can tell you is there have been a lot of schools that have already started reaching out to him, Group of 5 and Power 5. I think there's going to be a lot of intriguing options. I know a lot of people obviously have been kind of texting me, asking me, is he going to go to UTSA or whatnot, because he's from San Antonio. And so I think, a lot of people are thinking about that because they're off to that 4-0 start. But like I said, I think this is going to be a case where he's going to take his time with this decision and with this process. But there are going to be some teams interested, and we'll see if he ends up adding to the offer list and finding a really good landing spot for himself.
When do you think Jacob came to this conclusion, Grayson? Do you think it was when Gary won the job first, right ahead of the season starting, or do you think this is something like the last few days? I mean, it seems like it's something that's been kind of weighing on him for a while now.
I think that, truthfully, I don't think that it really started to turn until probably last week. Mm-hmm. If I'm being really honest with you, I think that he kind of was sitting there thinking, okay, well, yeah, Gary's going to be the quarterback, but I mean, to be honest, Gary hadn't proven anything coming into the season. Obviously he's played really well up to this point, but before that, I think it was just like, let's take a wait and see approach and see what happens and see how things shake out. Because in this day of college football, I mean, Gary could have played one game and been benched. Now, obviously, that wasn't the case, but I really think that the kind of tide turned last week after the Kansas game when that's when I believe Chapin kind of took over that number 2 role, and that's when I believe Jacob came to the conclusion that, this wasn't going to be a situation where he was going to get any meaningful reps or the reps that he needed to really develop his game fully.
I agree. And based on me doing some due diligence, whatever I can, I think you're right. I think there was maybe a practice even last week in which all of a sudden the number 2s, and it was kind of like who's going to be getting the 2s, and all of a sudden there was Chapin. And I think that might have been the final straw with Jacob Zeno.
And to clarify what I mean by it's kind of lingering, it just felt like he's the type of guy that if he wasn't going to be the starter, something was going to have to give. So that's kind of what I was getting at with that question there.
Well, and Craig, what I would say to that is I think everyone, staff included, people that just kind of watch Baylor football knew, someone was going to have to leave this quarterback room.
Right, yeah.
There's no way that they could have gone into the season next year with the same exact quarterback room. That's just not feasible in today's college football landscape.
Isn't that interesting, though, that the 2 names that were the polarizing names last year, with Charlie moving to Utah after the season and Zeno's name being chanted at McLean Stadium and all over the message boards, that neither one of them are at Baylor, and Scary Bohannon, who came out of this thing when all the dust settled?
Yeah, that is really interesting. And, I would say, and I'm not going to sit here and say that Gary wouldn't have been the quarterback under Larry Fedora, but, I think that situations change, offensive coordinators change. And, for this team, it seems like it fits Gary and Chapin better than it does Jacob. And, we kind of saw that at the end of spring when Gary had a nice spring game and Jacob didn't. You saw that. And then in fall camp, Gary just got better and better and more comfortable in the offense. And Jacob kind of stayed the same, and you want to see growth every week. And so, I think the offensive scheme changing really could have benefited Gary and Chapin for that matter.
Grayson, are you surprised that that people forgot about Gary? Everybody was so excited when he came to Baylor, and Zeno had those 2 passes. It's like everybody just put Gary out of their mind for a year.
See, I think it honestly happened more so at the end of last year. I know the Oklahoma game was one of those things where you go, oh, man, look at Jacob Zeno flashing. But I truly think it was the end of last year when Jacob took over the number 2 job and was getting all the number 2 reps. Obviously, there was extenuating circumstances going on with Gary, but Jacob became the number 2. And so everyone was like, oh, man, he's, risen up the depth chart and all of these things. But again, like I mentioned, you change OCs and you go through spring camp. And I remember in spring camp, I think the buzz early was honestly, and this wasn't just from, media or from fans. I truly do think that Jacob Zeno had a little bit of a lead during spring camp until the spring game happened. And then I think that's when Gary really showed, okay, man, look at what we got with Gary. The lights came on. He really played well. He's starting to turn a corner a little bit. And then fall camp happened and Gary really, like I said, continue to progress. And yeah, you're right. I think people kind of forgot about him for whatever reason. And I also think, you like what you haven't necessarily seen, if that makes sense. Like you saw Jacob throw those balls against Oklahoma and you go, oh man, imagine what could happen if he got more opportunities. But you never really got to see that with Gary in those moments, which is unfortunate that people forget what he did against UTSA. And, he had a nice throw in the Oklahoma game as well. It just wasn't as good of a performance. He had an injury as well, which didn't help. But, yeah, it's an interesting factor. And at the end of the day, Baylor has a really good quarterback room, and it just seems like, this is going to be a common thing. And based on what Dave Aranda said to you, Smokey, it just seems like this is just going to be one of those situations where quarterback rooms are going to change all around the country pretty much every year, and that's just what it is.
Yeah, Grayson, thank you. So you have Bohannon at the top, Chapin too. Obviously, Kyron Drones is there. You mentioned Rogers from Argyle, and then there's Bass, who's there on the depth chart as well. And then whoever they bring in, if they do with this class, based on the fact that they lost Pyron, and it looks like he's not going to be a part of the 2022 class based on some things you've written today as well. Great stuff. Thank you, Grayson, for being a part of it. The Bearcast, that goes up tonight. Is that right? Is it already out?
It's already
out.
Yeah.
It is out with both Grayson and Craig every Tuesday afternoon. It's up on the site. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Grayson Grundhoefer, Sikkim365.com.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, you know. Good luck to Jacob Zeno, and shame that he could never, you know, make the mark that you thought he might be able to make after that brief appearance against Oklahoma and those couple throws. But you know what? Credit to Gary Bohannon for winning the job outright and for performing the way that he has up until this point. I mean, that second half last week is one the entire offense probably just wants to wipe away. But you know, they've shown some good things, and this will be a great challenge. I mean, Gary and facing pressure is going to be just massive in this game because they're going to be bringing a lot of heat his way, and he hasn't faced a lot of heat when you really think about it. So, I mean, huge game for the O-line and for Gary Bohannon to see how they handle all of that. But, I mean, he's clearly got control of the offense and clearly is a guy that the team looks to. And I think they're in a good spot even without Zeno being there any longer.
And they haven't really let him even do all that much of the passing game yet.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, you know.
But Iowa State did start to put lean on him. They started going after him, and things did change in the second half. So that's good that Baylor saw that, and they can try to adjust to it just like others who play Baylor could adjust to it as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's read Paul.